Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. We are pleased to have as our guest today, Missy Stuart, CAA Athletic Director at Green Canyon High School up in Cache Valley in the shadow of Utah State University. Welcome to the podcast, Missy.
Thank you, Hutch.
Why don't you begin by sharing with our listeners here in Utah and across the U.S. where you grew up, where you went to college, your first jobs, that type of a thing.
Okay. So I was actually born in Tacoma, Washington. I was adopted by my parents who were living in Pullman, Washington. My dad was going to Washington State and working there. So we lived there in Pullman until first grade. Then we moved out to a farm town called Colton, Washington, which was about 30 miles outside of Pullman. And we lived there, little teeny tiny town. I went to a school that there's one school. There's a Catholic school and then one public school. It's kindergarten through high school, all in the same school.
Let me just interrupt quickly.
Yeah.
How does your parents are in Pullman, if my geography is correct, Tacoma's on the other side of the state. So
yeah.
They're living in Tacoma at the time. And then after they got you as a bundle of joy, they moved to Pullman. How does that work?
No. So they were living in Pullman when they adopted me. I was just born in Tacoma and they came to get me. Yeah. So I never lived in Tacoma other than the few days that I was there in the hospital. So
perfect. Let me so there you're in this small town and it's just like a K through 12 school, I guess.
Yep. There was like 6 people my age. I was like a total tomboy and all the girls in the school wanted to play with Barbies and I didn't want to. But I did because that's what they were doing. But yeah, it was interesting. It was total like farm community. They had football and boys basketball. That's all I remember them having, but we'd get out of school, everybody, for the football games because there was no lights. So you got out of school to go to the football games. I thought that was pretty fun.
Okay.
So we lived there until I was 12. And then we moved to Smithfield, Utah. My dad got a job at Utah State. So we moved to Utah when I was 12. So been here ever since. Went to Skyview High School, and then I went to Rick's College for 2 years, graduated in sports medicine. I wanted to be a trainer at first, so that was kind of my path, and then changed when I came to Utah State after my 2 years at Rick's and went into teaching. PE and health was my degree. Got an endorsement in history, and then got my master's in health education. Then I've just been teaching ever since. I was at Skyview High School for 22 years. Came to Green Canyon 4 years ago when this school opened.
So you got into athletic administration at Smithfield. Well, not Smithfield, Skyview in That's Smithfield. Right. Yeah. And so at the beginning you were with Ryan Grunig then, and you kind of shared it. And then you became the full-time AD over at Green Canyon.
Yeah, this is just the start of my second year being the full-time AD. So I was a co-AD with Odell Speth the first 3 years here at Green Canyon. And then this is my first year, or my start of my second year being the full-time AD. I was still teaching when I was a co-AD.
Okay. Well, and I think a lot of people understand what the time commitment is for this job. So I'm sure life, even though your life is crazy now, it's a little bit easier now that you're in that full-time position.
It is nice to just focus on one thing.
Yeah.
And not,
So tell me, did you play a lot of youth sports at all? I mean, I know you played with Barbies back up in that small town in Washington, but
well,
when you
I actually played football. I was the quarterback, and I was a huge tomboy, and my mom didn't want me to be. She'd make me wear dresses to school, and I just wore shorts under my dress. And but yeah, back then it's interesting as I've thought through my life being adopted. My parents, well, I thought a lot about nature versus nurture because I think that athletics was always my nature. It wasn't a part of my family. My parents did not play sports, my adopted parents, and none of my siblings really did. And I remember at a young age just begging them to sign me up for soccer because soccer was big in Washington, and I saw people playing and I'm like, I want to do that. And I begged my dad to put a basketball hoop up on our garage, which he did, and then we'd all go out and shoot. And so youth sports I didn't do a ton because it wasn't a part of our family. Like I said, when we moved to Utah, it was soccer was actually bigger in Washington than it was in Utah at that time. There wasn't very many soccer teams, but I found one to be on. So I did play soccer a lot as a youth. I played, but other than that, it was church sports. I played basketball, softball, volleyball.
well, now tell me this on a side note. As you well know, or maybe you didn't know, I spent 4 years coaching the semi-professional women's football team, the Utah Falcons. How come I was never aware that I could have recruited you to play quarterback for us?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. There was actually a lady up here in Cache Valley that was telling me about that league, and I'm like, oh my heavens, that would be so fun. But with kids at that point, I have kids that are involved, and yeah, it would have been tough to go that far to play.
Well, that's probably true, but the quarterback we did have, I think the third year I was there, she was a 44-year-old with 3 kids.
Yeah.
Graduated from BYU, so I would have loved to have recruited you to the Falcons, but that's water under the bridge.
That would have been fun. Yeah.
All right, well, share with our listeners some of the mentors or leaders you had growing up, or even once you started coaching and teaching. And
well, I ended up,
in high school.
So I ended up in high school playing tennis and basketball, and I ran track. And my track coach, my basketball and track coach were the same person. Cindy Kruger is her name, and I loved her, and I had a blast playing sports, and so she definitely would be one of my mentors.
Did she play Utah State? Is it the same person I'm thinking of?
Yeah, she was a softball player at Utah State. Yeah.
Yeah, very good softball player, as I remember.
Yeah, and I can't remember what high school she went to down there. Well, no, I don't think she went to high school there, but she left Skyview to go to teach and coach somewhere in Salt Lake after she left Skyview.
Okay. Well, didn't mean to interrupt. I just a familiar name, so continue on.
Yeah. So she's definitely one of my mentors. I really liked her, and she helped me try to reach my full potential. In some areas, I probably all of us look back and think I could have done better at some things if I would have put in a little more effort. But sports to me was just fun. And I wasn't at that time looking to use it as a way for college. I did get offered a scholarship to Utah State to run track, which I was like, I don't want to do that.
Okay.
I want to go have fun. And so I went to Rick's College instead. But other mentors, I really liked our athletic director that I had in high school. Oh shoot, now his name's going to leave me. And then when I had the chance to come back to my alma mater and start teaching and coaching, and for a while I was coaching the same sports that I played. I was the tennis coach, I was an assistant basketball coach, and an assistant track coach. And the athletic director at Skyview when I was teaching and coaching, Jan Hall. He was great. And I loved him. And I mean, looking back at that time, I wasn't thinking, oh, I want to be an athletic director. I think that just things led to that. But those are definitely some mentors that have helped me in being an athletic director and looking back and thinking about, even though things have changed so much in this position from, the things that they had to do to the things we have to do now. So they are definitely some mentors. I had some college professors too that I really loved that helped me, find a path that was right for me.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing. Let me ask you this. What is your biggest failure and what did you learn from it?
No, I don't. I mean, that's a hard
Or
one.
maybe instead of failure, maybe disappointment, if that fits.
I know. I feel like I was brought up that we don't fail necessarily. You're gonna not always have things go your way or be successful, but you just keep trying until it feels right. So it's not really considered a failure. So I don't know. When I don't get something right the first time, I'm just going to keep trying until it feels right so that it's not a failure. So I don't know. I mean, I wonder sometimes about if I should have ran track in college,
Mm-hmm.
What that would have looked like. And yet, I'm happy with my college experience and where it took me, where I'm at now. But I have thought about that. I can't get my son to keep his room clean.
Yeah. Join the club.
I'm still working on that one.
What's one common myth about being an athletic director that you'd like to debunk?
Well, maybe a couple things. It's not the same as what it used to be. There's a lot to it now that's required. Definitely that it's not just a man's job. Females can do it.
I like that.
So, and I don't know if that's a myth, but
Either that or the myth is that, well, all you do is go to games. I don't know what you do all day, but you just go to games and the rest just takes care of itself, which is obviously not how it works.
yeah, no, and I've learned that. But, I learned that as a coach too, that there's a lot that, goes into coaching and then into being an AD. Yes, definitely.
Well, let me ask you this. So how did you hear of the UIAAA? How did you become involved in the state association? Obviously, you've served on our athletic director executive committee for years and years. Obviously, you've become certified. So share with our listeners how does a female AD that no one knows all of a sudden become involved and well known in the state of Utah?
Well, first off, when got offered the position to be an AD, our principal, Dave Swenson, told me and Ryan that he wanted us to get involved and that he wanted us to get certified. So that's what ultimately started the, taking the classes and doing those things. And then going to I do have to admit that the first time going to the UIAAA conference was a little intimidating. Being a female.
And why is that? Oh, just because there wasn't as many females as you'd like to see there.
And I don't know, just not knowing people, there's of course people that already know each other and, so I'd go and just kind of sit, and listen and learn. I mean, they learned a lot from things there, but but just like in anything in life, you just go and you meet new people and you build friendships and mentors to help you, people networking, people you can call and say, okay, how do you handle this? Or what do you do with this? And Ryan, of course, was big in getting involved in it. And so that helped me to, he helped me get more involved with things as it went on. And so, yeah, it's been great. I love it.
So you've become certified. I know you spent some time on the scholarship committee. That had to be a big job.
Yeah, that is a big job. But it's fun, to read about all the different athletes that are in the state and the accomplishments. It's been pretty amazing, the caliber of athletes that we have in our state, and just their academics. They're so productive in lots of ways, lots of areas.
So how did you approach? I assume it was still Dave Swinson. How did you approach him and say, yeah, I want to go to the national conference? Because as you well know, not every school and not every district will send their athletic directors to a national conference.
Well, I don't really remember. I just said, is it okay if I go to this? He's like, sure. He's the kind of, it helps to have our admin. Now both of our vice principals here too have been coaches and athletes. And I think it helps when you have admin that have been coaches and they see that benefit. And, and then after the first time I went and came back and we went over things with the staff, like our coaching staff, things that I learned and things that we want to do to improve, and they see you using what you have learned at the conferences, then they're more apt to send you back. They see changes in the athletic program because of things you've learned from other ADs around the nation.
Let me ask you this then. How has it been? Because I realize that generally, even across the US and even in Utah, that people consider it, and generally it's a male dominated field. So I think we have more females in Utah now and more nationally. But how is that? Is it tougher for you because you're a female? Was it tougher to get involved? I mean, you mentioned you were intimidated at your first conference, but obviously I can only ask because I don't understand what it's like, because I have never been in your shoes as far as being a female. I've been in your shoes as far as being, I'm brand new and do I need to go to the conference and I'm here with all these people that I don't know and, oh, how did they get to be so smart type of a thing. But how has that been for you?
Like just being accepted, you mean?
Well, I would like to think in Utah, and of course I don't know this, but I think we've gone to great lengths to make sure that everyone's inclusive, male, female, white, brown, black, etc., that type of a thing. But I'm interested in your point of view, because even though I think it's that way and I think we've gotten better, maybe we haven't. I don't know. So that's why I'm interested to hear your point of view on it.
Yeah, so I definitely feel in so like in the UIAAA setting or the NIAAA setting, definitely females are accepted. I still feel sometimes in just the public view, not as much. Or like, sometimes the people hear, oh, you're an athletic director, or, like, or even, other principals, like you're in a meeting and a region meeting and your voice isn't, you don't feel like your voice is even being heard because you're a female, or you're just whiny.
Well, that's sad but true. And so let's tie this in. I wouldn't consider you a first generation Title IXer, but I would assume a second generation. I assume all of your life when you grew up there was always female sports in high school? Because I'm assuming you're significantly younger than I am, and weren't there in the 70s when it first came to be. But I'm assuming you're a child of the 80s, if I'm correct, and
Yeah.
that
I was in high
you
school.
were part of that group that's just, well, there it's high school. We've got girls soccer, we've got volleyball, and never really questioned what it was like before then.
Well, there's a little bit of that. There was no girls sports at that Colton, the K through 12 school, which again, looking back, I wasn't happy about moving to Utah. I didn't want to, but it was the best thing because I ended up playing sports. There wouldn't have been sports for me to play in Washington at that high school. And then in high school, like soccer that I had played, that's the sport I had played the most growing up. And it was a club at Skyview. And it cost a lot of money to play. So I ended up doing track instead because I had to pay for everything that I did. My family didn't have money for me to play sports and do extracurricular. So I worked and paid for everything myself. And so I didn't end up playing soccer in high school because of that. Softball got put in the year after I graduated, which was in 1988.
Okay.
So I did see some of that, and definitely in the basketball, like as far as being a player in high school and going, finding church houses and elementary schools to practice at because the boys had the gyms at the high school.
And the big gym was the boys' gym, and the small gym was the girls' gym.
Well, at that point, the small gym was the boys also.
Oh, well, that's.
We were practicing we either had to go in the morning or to a church house or an elementary school.
I'm glad we're past those days.
Yeah, me too. And it changed when I was coaching, when I went back to coach, so it changed pretty, just the few years after I graduated.
I can remember. So I started in 1979 at Jordan High. It was the old Jordan High. And we had the boys' gym. It wasn't very big. If you sat in the bleachers and had your heels back up against the bottom bleacher, your toes would be on the out of bounds line.
Yeah. Our gym was like that too.
And then we had like the bottom, and then you had the balcony upstairs. But
yeah.
So I started coaching, and we were relegated to it was called the auxiliary gym, but they called it the girls' gym. But I found out the year before I got there, they practiced in the old, they practiced in the cafeteria. They put up baskets in the cafeteria and moved the tables out of the way, and that's where the girls practiced.
Wow.
And I think the first year I was there, I think the only time we ever saw floor time in the big gym or in the boys' gym was when the boys maybe had a Friday night game. And so we were allowed, before the sophomore and JV game started, if there was some time, we were allowed to practice in there. But that was basically the only time that we saw that. And this is 79. So this is maybe 7 years after Title IX. And in those days, because gymnastics was big at Jordan, then gymnastics would start practice in January. And so then they got the small gym. And even though it was the middle of our region season, I had to wait till the gymnastics team was done practicing to practice for our games, even though they didn't start their meets until the last week of March. So
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand where you've been on that.
Yeah. So we've come a long way.
So do you feel like, and you spoke about how sometimes in the public, but and I think you've mentioned that at least you feel accepted in the UIAAA, but it's got to be frustrating when you're in a region meeting with other principals or possibly in a state meeting where they look at you like, well, you're the AD. They give you that look like, really, you're a female. So how can you be the AD? I just would think that's still got to be very frustrating for you.
Yeah. And I the region that we're in right now is not that way at all. this would be a previous region that I kind of felt that way a little bit, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't, things might get to me for a minute, but then I don't let it, like I said, okay, well then I got to fix that view, what am I going to do to change that perception?
Great attitude. Let me ask you this. What's the favorite part of your job of being an athletic administrator?
Well, definitely the games, the part that everybody thinks that's what we do. That's all we do. It has been really fun to get to know all the athletes, as a coach. So I coached tennis for 18 years and track for 20. And you get to know those athletes, of course, really well. And other athletes. I was always one that wanted to go to all the sporting events at the school. And so you get to know them and the kids in your classes and all that. But I don't know, it's been fun to know them, get to know them differently, I guess. So not as a coach, not as a teacher, even though you kind of still are those things to them, you're still trying to teach them and coach them. And, the ones that sometimes, need some reminders on getting to class and completing their work. And, it's fun to mentor them and help them understand that they need to be a student first. Being an athlete's a privilege. So that's been really fun. And then just to go see them then compete, or, sometimes they'll come to you and ask for advice about different things. And that's been really fun. And even just how to, because I think that probably most schools do this, where you encourage the athletes to go to the coach first if there's a concern.
Yes.
So sometimes seeing them or helping them know how to feel confident to do that, or how to say something to a coach, or so it's been fun to mentor that way differently, and then see them do it and be successful. And then when they're struggling with mental things, or things at home, or I don't know, it's just like anything in life, you're just a counselor nonstop.
It's got to be crazy. And of course, I'm retired now, but I can't imagine what your year was like last year with COVID, because I'm sure you were like testing 3 days a week and this, that, and the other thing. So,
yeah. And our kids are pretty good. I did joke around last year, because there were a lot that were not happy with me because of I'm always on their case about wearing a mask. They thought
because you were the COVID Nazi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm really nice, but put your dang mask on.
Well, there you go.
You again.
Let me ask you, if you had 2 pieces of advice that you could give to a new athletic administrator in order for them to be successful, what would those 2 items be?
You need a mentor. You need somebody to help you. Whether that's somebody in the region or, but yeah, because there's a lot to do. So I think a mentor really helps, somebody that you can always call, email, whatever, to talk through things. And then I definitely think getting involved in the state association at least really helps. Like I said, it was intimidating at first, but part of that was just on me, my insecurities, because everybody was so nice. I remember Ron Dolphin. He's probably the first one that, reached out, hey, how are you? Who are you? And made me feel welcome. And yeah. So
hopefully I was nice to you, because I can't remember the first time I met you. It just seems like you've been around for so long, but I know that's not the case.
About 7 years now. Yeah, you were always great, Hutch. But I just feel like at the conference that first time, when I was like,
but I think that's
second guessing. Why am I here?
That's got to be I think that's got to be the same for a male or a female, because I remember my first Utah conference. I remember my first national conference, and I was just thinking, wow, these people are so smart. How do they get to be that way?
Sorry, I have a coach outside my window here.
Well, then tell him you got 2 minutes. Let me finish with this question then. What question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
Oh, I don't know. My most embarrassing moment. Just
Okay,
kidding.
so
I don't want to share that.
Okay, well then I won't ask you your most embarrassing moment, but
I don't know what I've thought a lot about, well, the coaching path. I don't know. Do you think most ADs were coaches?
I think a lot of them were. I think if you're in a state like Texas, I think a lot of that's a lot of the path that they become coaches, then become ADs. Some of them are ADs, and in Texas, the big time Texas football coaches are also the AD, and that's all they do. Mm. They coach football, and some of them are great, and some of them not so great. But I think you're going to find it's a common path that most ADs that I've met really came up through the ranks. They played as a kid like you did. They were involved in high school. They got into teaching and coaching because they loved it. And then an opportunity came for them to be the AD, and they latched onto it and became successful. So.
Yeah, because I feel like I agree. Because looking back, I mean, I was not ever thinking about being an AD. I was happy with what I was doing, but then, like you said, the opportunity. Yeah, and mine was mostly because my daughter started into high school and she decided to play volleyball, and I was coaching tennis. And so that was a conflict. I couldn't make her matches when I was coaching. So I gave up tennis. And then she was playing softball and I was coaching track, and the same thing. There's conflicts. And I'm like, I mean, I was at a track meet. We were hosting a track meet. She was at an away softball game and she hit a grand slam. And I'm like, okay, how many times will she do that?
Yeah, and you don't get that back. And I just
missed it. So I'm like, I'm done. And then it was that next year that the AD thing, and I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe this is something I can still be involved in sports. I can still be to her things, her games. And so I
one
just
door closes and another one opens up. So
yeah,
very good.
Yeah.
Well, that wraps it up for another edition of the UIAAA Connection. Once again, our guest has been Missy Stuart, Certified Athletic Administrator and the Athletic Director at Green Canyon. Is that right? Green Canyon. Yeah. I don't want to say Green Valley. It's Green Canyon High School. Yeah. Thanks for being with us, Missy.
Thank you. Good luck to everyone.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.